We're just trying to get these companies to operate better the way they used to. We wouldn't be there if they really were doing well. Clearly, they're not thrilled to see us. But what usually happens is that these stocks go up.
Nelson Peltz and his Trian Fund Management made a fortune being activist investors in some of the best-known brands in America: Heinz, Wendy's, DuPont, PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble, Mondelez, and the list goes on.
I like fixing things, and I like growing things.
You can say it all began when he took a contrarian view toward traditional education.
What I really wanted to do was ski. So I left Wharton, and I went up to Maine and became a ski bum.
Eventually, Peltz came home and drove a truck for his father's food distribution company. He ended up growing the company and making it the cornerstone of his own business.
While I was running this food business, I kept investing. I liked investing. And then I felt it was time for us to expand.
Peltz did things like buy Snapple from Quaker Oats, turn it around, and sell it to Cadbury Schweppes. It became a Harvard Business School case study, and in 2005, Peltz co-founded Trian.
We saw great opportunity by having a fund that could make investments in bigger companies.
Peltz and Trian typically build up a stake in the company and eventually meet with management to discuss ways to fix the business. But he's not a fan of the term activist investor. So for those who don't know, what is an active investor?
We're not an active investor. What we see is really companies that we think were once great, have lost their way, and that we have a plan for them to get back to greatness again. And that's what we do. We're not there to leverage up these companies. We're not there to split them up. We're not there to do all the terrible things that typically go along with the term activist. We're just trying to get these companies to operate better the way they used to.
Okay, so what you typically do, for those who don't know, is you buy some stock in the company. That's a large public company.
Right.
Then when you own a stake and you become public in it, you notify the CEO that you're a big shareholder?
Exactly right.
And
now you're an activist.
Okay. When you notify the CEO and you say, I'm Nelson Peltz, I'm here to help you, does he say, geez, I don't really need that much help? Or he says, okay, give me your ideas?
All the above, okay? Sometimes no one is thrilled that we're there. Some are much more receptive to hear what we've got to say. We've put together a white paper to go over with management, and that white paper stays private as long as we're in conversation, and if we want a board seat when we think that they're ready to give us a board seat, it will always stay private. But if they refuse to, then we make that white paper public.
All right, so of the 30 times you've done this or so, how many times did the CEO say, thank you for showing up, I really want your advice? And how many they say, thank you, but I don't need your advice?
I can't tell you, but I don't remember anybody ever saying the former, okay? But not very often have they been as tough as you said on the latter. Clearly they're not thrilled to see us. But what usually happens is that these stocks go up. And they go up nicely for the right reasons, because sales have gone up, market shares have gone up, earnings clearly have gone up. And we tell them what we think they're doing wrong. The most recent one, which is really interesting, was Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble was about a $70 stock for almost 10 years. And the biggest consumer company in the world, but really giving away market share here and there wherever anybody was challenging them. We didn't think the company was structured properly. So we went to them and gave them a plan and said, look, there's one CEO, no one has P&L responsibility in this company anywhere other than the CEO. So there's really no ability to impact things because everything was a matrixed organization. We gave them our structure. They rejected it. We had a proxy fight. We finally won our board seat, and the shareholders won.
So to decide what companies to invest in, there are an infinite number of companies you could invest in. So how do you decide which ones you want to fix and help fix?
Well, the companies that we think we know something about their industries, anything consumer, including restaurants, asset management companies, when we've been in one from Legg Mason 2 times to Invesco, to Janus Henderson, Mellon. We've been in all of those. So there's a financials that we call financials without balance sheets.
Okay. So when you make these investments, you have outside advisors that advise you, McKinsey or Bain or BCG, that help you come up with some plan to go forward, or
No.
you do it all internal?
All done here.
So you have a research team in New York, because that's where you're based.
In this office and in Florida.
And when did you start the company?
Well, we started Trian Partners in '05. Okay. Before that, I was buying companies like you did, not with a fund, but with vehicles or with capital that we could cobble together. And we did some very good deals back then. We bought, what we created was American National Can, which was the biggest packaging company in the world at that time. We bought Snapple from Quaker Oats and turned that around. We created National Propane. So we did that on a single company where we own the company. And then we decided to have a fund, and that we saw great opportunity by having a fund that could make investments in bigger companies that we couldn't buy. The first one we started with was Wendy's. The second one was Heinz. And Heinz unfortunately wound up to be a proxy fight. It didn't need to be. I got on the board. Bill Johnson and I became very good friends, who was chairman and CEO, who fought with us. He ultimately wound up to be on our advisory board, and he was our nominee on the board of Pepsi. So think about that. We had a proxy fight and became very fast friends, which usually is what happens.
So let's go, before we get back to more of what you're doing, your background. So from your accent, it sounds like you're from New York.
I'm from Brooklyn.
All right, you're from Brooklyn, part of New York. Okay, so you're
Special part of New York.
Special part. Okay, so were you growing up in a wealthy family in Brooklyn?
No, I was growing up in a middle-class
Okay.
family in Brooklyn.
And what did your father do?
My father had a produce and frozen food distributorship right in Lower Manhattan in the old Washington Market, and it was doing about $2 million a year in total volume, but he supported a family beautifully on it.
Okay, so were you a superstar student in high school or a great athlete? What were you most interested in?
Well, I thought I was a great athlete, that's for sure. I don't know that my coaches agreed with me, but I was not a superstar student. I went to public school through the 8th grade, went to high school, went to Wharton, okay.
Well, getting into Wharton isn't that easy, so you must have been a pretty good student.
I got good college boards,
Okay.
and I got to Wharton and really was quite bored at Wharton. I felt I was in the wrong place. What I really wanted to do was ski. So I left Wharton and I went up to Maine and became a ski bum.
What did your family say, Nelson, we really wanted you to go to Wharton and be a good student. You want to ski? I mean, that's not what you're supposed to do.
That's correct. They did say that.
What did you do? You said, I'm going to ski?
My father was an amazing guy. He wasn't happy that I left Wharton. He wasn't happy that I was a ski bum. And he wasn't happy that I grew a beard. But I did all of those things. And the snow melted in late spring and came back, and I had a summer job offered to me in Mount Hood, Oregon, to help them teach racing to young kids in Mount Hood, Oregon, and I needed some money to get out there. I asked him if he'd give me a job on a truck, $100 a week, 2 weeks. That was all I needed. He said, fine, shave your beard off and do it. I said I would. So I shaved my beard off, and after about a week on the job, I started telling him things that I thought that were missed opportunities. And he set me up beautifully. He said, why don't you stay here and do what you want to do instead of going out to Mount Hood, Oregon? Well, I did, and that's what happened.
So when did you leave the family business and start your own company?
What I did was I started to build that business, and I had a portfolio of bar mitzvah money and gifts, and I started investing in the market, and I started a little fund with my money and some of my family and friends, and we did pretty well. So while I was running this food business, I kept investing. I liked investing. And then I felt it was time for us to expand. When I came to the business, we had no salesmen. I built a sales force in New York. Then I wanted to buy a company in Boston doing the same thing. We did. I put the money up for that personally. I became the largest share owner. Then we bought one in Baltimore, Washington, another distribution house, and then one in Philadelphia. And then we were doing almost $150 million a year in business, the largest food service distributor in the Northeast at that time. Took it public, sold it, and then went on to doing other things. I think what people don't understand is that we are making their portfolios better.
Benjamin Graham is known as the father of value investing and literally wrote the book on it. But before that, Graham was an early activist investor. Almost a century ago, he gathered other shareholders and convinced a pipeline company to sell off the millions it owned in railroad bonds and other securities and then distribute those proceeds. Activist investors buy a chunk of a company's stock and then pressure management to make changes. That may involve restructuring and selling off part of a company, getting a seat on the board of directors, or getting rid of certain board members. Activist investors will target companies that are poorly managed or operate inefficiently. Among the big names that have made their mark in activist investing are Carl Icahn, Paul Singer, Bill Ackman, Dan Loeb, and Nelson Peltz. In 2017, Peltz targeted Procter & Gamble after his Trian Fund Management took a stake in the company. After a costly proxy fight, he won a seat on the board. Peltz argued that P&G suffered from a bloated structure and needed to be reorganized. P&G didn't follow all his suggestions, but streamlined its operations, cleared out its bureaucracy, and improved its earnings growth. In the time Peltz was on the board, the stock rose 58%, making shareholders very happy. Now, years ago, I'd say in the 1970s and 1980s, if you were trying to change a company from the outside, people said, well, you're a raider, you're an activist, you're not good for America, and just let the board run the company the way the CEO wants to do it. And for that reason, a lot of institutional investors never would invest with people that were trying to do what you were trying to do now. How has the world changed? Because now you have institutional investors, many big public pension funds, I assume. Why are they now so happy with what you do as opposed to 25 years ago or so where they said, we don't want that kind of approach?
Because they want their portfolios to perform, and their portfolios haven't performed. You know, the first quarter this year, and I don't mean to pick on private equity, the S&P was down dramatically, and one of the private equity firms, not yours, so I'm not, so
okay,
you're
that's okay.
Free and clear, reported that their portfolios had a rough quarter and they were up 2.8%. Now 2.8% versus the S&P in the first quarter don't even look like one another, okay? But some of these investors and some of these institutions are happy with that because they can report what happened and they'll put that up 2.8% versus their public equities portfolio. At a certain point in time, that's got to change, okay? But I think what people don't understand is that we are making their portfolios better, okay? We are making mega cap stocks. Nobody is going to buy P&G. Nobody is going to buy Unilever. Okay, so there are only a few people who can have an impact on a company like that and have that which is probably, those stocks are probably in 50% of pension fund portfolios. And that's what we need to do.
So let's go inside the boardroom. Let's suppose you win a proxy fight and or you just get invited onto the board. You go to your first board meeting and you're the person who's saying you can fix this company, and all of the others on the board of directors are saying, well, we're doing pretty well. How do you get received when you start saying, here's what I wanted you to do?
Well, first of all, we don't bring that to the boardroom. Our time is spent with the CEO, the chairman, the CFO, and share our plans with them outside the boardroom. We try never to solve an issue in a boardroom. Okay, it's always best done the day before, the week before, outside of that room. We wouldn't be there if they really were doing well. So it's really hard for them to straight face and tell us we're doing well. And we present them with a plan. And that, look at Heinz, which was our first really aggressive salvo. We became a very large shareholder of Heinz. We went to them with a plan. They didn't want any part of us. They didn't know who we were. And Heinz had had a 10-year stint of flat to down sales and earnings the same. And what we saw at Heinz very clearly is that every quarter, every year, their direct market spend declined. Okay, so everybody probably has a bottle of Heinz in their pantry. The key was, how do you get it out of the pantry, on the table, and turn it upside down? That wasn't happening. So what we did is we said to them, you've got to raise your direct selling expense. Well, why did it keep going down? You know yourself, if there are estimates of earnings in the next quarter, and it's the middle of the quarter, and your CFO comes running in and says, we're not going to make consensus, there's very little that you have impact on in that quarter for that quarter, except advertising spend. So what they did is they cut advertising spend, made the quarter, but what was going to happen in the next quarter? Where was the wind at their back for the next quarter to get sales going again? So what happened is, when we were all said and done at Heinz, advertising spend was about 1.5% of sales. That's probably what U.S. Steel spends on advertising. When we left the company, we sold it to Buffett and the Brazilians, it was spending close to 5% of sales, and we had 36 straight quarters of organic sales increases. There was no other consumer company that could say that.
Suppose you buy stock in a company and you say, I'm not going to go on your board, I just want to give you my advice, I'm not really ever interested in going to the board. You think you would have that much impact as
we do that sometimes.
So sometimes you don't want to go on the board.
It's not a matter of wanting to, it's a matter of how receptive management is to our suggestions. Ferguson is a company we bought a lot of stock in, never got on the board, never asked for a board seat, really had a great relationship, as we do today, with management. No need for us to go on the board. At one point, we were the largest share owner of Domino's. We spent time with those guys, did not feel that they needed us on the board, and they did great things. We sold the stock too early, but made a lot of money on it. So we have those relationships at times. I think cash flow, stability, good quality companies, when this is all over, are going to be valued once again.
As we talk today, the U.S. economy is maybe soft a little bit. It's not going to grow at the rates that we would all like, and maybe we're actually going to go into recession at some point. Inflation's high. How does that affect your business?
Well, it affects every business. The problem that we all have had, those who invest in public securities opposed to private ones, is that unless you're in 12 or 14 stocks, it was really hard to keep pace with the S&P over the last 5 or 6 years. It was ridiculous. All of the gains came in that dozen or so stocks. Today, I think there is a reversal. I think even though we're going to be in a recession, I think cash flow, stability, good quality companies, when this is all over, are going to be valued once again. And those are the kind of companies that we invest in. They're boring companies. They're really wonderful companies that generate cash, just need to be treated properly and have a good plan. And those are the companies we like.
So the great pleasure of your financial career is building a kind of type of investing business that hadn't really existed before quite this way.
That's correct.
And that's
Look, we did the first LBO takeover that ever actually closed. Before that, they were all green mail. I didn't want a green mail. I wanted to own the company and run it and have it grow, and we were able to do that. So I've known what it is to be CEO and running one of these businesses, and I have spent most of my career running businesses, meeting targets, setting projections, and it wasn't until just 2005 where I became what you would call an activist investor. So I understood what these people had to do. I understood what it meant to report to a public and to have annual meetings and to stand up there and take the questions.
So if somebody's watching this and says, I want to be the next Nelson Peltz, I like the kind of business he's doing, he's making companies more efficient by shaking up their approaches a bit, what would you say the skill set is? Is it to drop out of college? Is it to have a good head for numbers? Is it to really have an outgoing personality? What is it that you really need to do this kind of business well?
I think it's all of the above,
Okay, and you have a good sense.
And
for
good lucky.
But let's suppose somebody says, "I'd like to do what Nelson Peltz does, but I'm a little shy, and I really don't like confronting people, and I'd like to kind of, just maybe be polite all the time to people and never actually tell them something they don't want to hear." That's not going to work,
then
right?
You should go in technology.
Different
probably,
business.
right?
Okay. So in your career, what was the best investment advice you ever got? Somebody ever give you some great investment advice? Says, sales up, expenses down. That's your best advice.
My father told me that, and that's why when I dropped out of Wharton, I knew I didn't need to know much more.
If somebody said to you, what are the biggest mistakes that you see investors make? What would you say the most common mistake that an investor makes?
I think they lose sight of their own common sense, their own judgment, and start to get swept up in a tide of euphoria. I think that's what happens. And without mentioning any specific companies, I don't have stock in one. I mean, there are companies today that finally the market woke up to them, but they had 10 plus years of phenomenal market share growth and never generated $1 of free cash flow. And they did it for 10 plus years, and the markets kept rewarding them until they finally stopped.